Question number 4 of the Summa Theologica has to do with the perfection of God. And just as a reminder, we are in the treatise on the one God, questions 2 of 26 in prima pars, which is the first part of the Summa. This is all about God, because if he cannot establish who God is, what God is, we'll get into the Trinity and the relations within the Trinity and a whole lot of good stuff in the questions ahead. But he's trying to establish what God is, who God is, because that's going to be the foundation of everything else that we're going to learn in the Summa Theologica. So this is the second of the attributes. Remember, we learned about simplicity as the first attribute, and then there's 5 more that are coming right after this one, all right? And so there's only 3 articles in this question. The first one is whether God is perfect. Now, of course, the answer is going to be yes to this, but what does it mean to be perfect? Okay, that God is perfect. We think of perfection as being something that doesn't lack anything. Okay, perfect means there's nothing wrong with it, right? And so it's almost unattainable here below. You could say it's the perfect sunset, but then the next day you might see one that's a little bit better, a perfect friend, and then a year later you got a better friend. So perfection here below is hard to come by. But with God being perfect, what does that mean? Thomas has an interesting explanation for this, right? He says it has to do with actuality and potentiality. Okay, these are very important words when you get into philosophy and theology, right? Potentiality means that you can be acted upon, you can change, you can adjust, or you're within time and that kind of thing. Actuality means that you act, you move, you cause. And Thomas's definition of God is that God is the pure act of being. Okay, God only acts. He has absolutely no potentiality, and this is the basis of his perfection. Okay, so I'm reading from this article here. The first active principle must needs be actual, most actual, and therefore most perfect. For a thing is perfect in proportion to its state of actuality. Okay, so God being perfectly actual, okay, that makes him perfect. He is the uncaused cause, as we learned. He's the unmoved mover, and he is pure act. Okay, we act, but we also are acted upon. Things happen to us. We are changed. We have passions. God, none of that applies to him, and therefore he is perfect. And that's the second attribute of God. Now, Article 2, when I first read this, totally blew my world, because this question is, I think, really the first time in the Summa that we begin to see Thomas directly talking about the relationship between God as being perfect and being simple, and a lot of the attributes that we're going to get to later on. But what about his relationship to the rest of the world? And this one, and for reasons I'll explain in a moment, really, really changed my life. Okay, whether the perfections of all things are in God. Okay, so I have a picture here of this beautiful, scenery. These clouds and the green shrubs and the tree branches and the leaves and all that. And what Thomas is going to say here is that there is a very distinct and special relationship between the created world and God himself. So God's perfection, yeah, he's perfect, but the imprint of his perfection is on the created world, right? So that means that everything that we experience in the world is a reflection of God. Okay, and as you go through the history of philosophy, you're going to see this carried out in different ways. In fact, the very first philosophers ever were the pre-Socratics, people like Thales and Anaximenes and Anaximander. And what they did was they looked out at the world and they saw unity in it, okay? And they tried to figure out, what is going on? What is this beauty? How do we make sense of it, okay? I think for a large part we've lost this in the world today, but Thomas didn't lose this, okay? He was a natural philosopher. And so, anyways, I'm going into a lot of detail here, but let me read something from the Summa about this, okay? All created perfections are in God. Okay, all created perfections are in God. Hence, he is spoken of as universally perfect, because he lacks not any excellence which may be found in any genus. Because whatever perfection exists in an effect must be found in the effective cause. Okay, so everything out there in the world is an effect of a cause. All right, the butterflies, the mountains, the clouds, the rain, the trees, the leaves, the seasons. So if there's anything you get out of the Summa, and I tell my students this all the time, I teach high school students the Summa, if there's anything you get out of it, it means it should be that you see the world differently. You see the world as a reflection of God. And I think this article here, and there's going to be many more of these, is the first time that Thomas kind of drives this point home, okay? And it's going to come back throughout the Summa, okay? All perfections are in God, all right? God is the first effective cause of all things. The perfections of all things must pre-exist in God in a more eminent way. Okay, God is existence itself. He must contain within himself the whole perfection of being. Okay, the whole perfection of being. And when we, many questions from now, get into our epistemology, how we come to know things, there's going to be a particular article that we go over having to do with what we can know, and this whole like totality of being is going to play a big part in that, of what we are able to know here below, and also in glory in the beatific vision. So I'm getting way ahead of myself, but that's what's coming. Okay, Article 3, this is the last article, whether any creature can be like God. Okay, now we see things in the world, beautiful people and sunsets and sunrises and, our children and our spouses, and we see a lot of beauty in the world. Well, this article confirms that these are, in fact, reflections of God. Okay, so we can't have this kind of materialistic, just, wow, that's beautiful, and then end there. No, the beauty is a reflection of God. The beauty always takes us back to a contemplation of God. So he says here, for since every agent reproduces itself so far as it is an agent, and everything acts according to the manner of its form, the effect must in some way resemble the form of the agent. Now, what we're going to learn as we go along is that the effects resemble the form in a different way. Okay, we reflect God much more than a rock does, or a centipede, or a butterfly. An angel reflects God in some ways even more than us, right? But in some ways not as much, and we'll learn about that as well. And so what's the takeaway from this whole article about the perfection of God is that, yes, God is perfect, and that's his second attribute. But Thomas Aquinas is really trying to make a point here in saying that God is perfect, but we can't see God. And so we come to know God through our nature, through the material world. And that means that every single day, every experience we have of the created world, without exception, is an opportunity for us to have an encounter with the living God, especially with the human person. Okay? The only thing that more reflects God in the physical world than the human person is the Eucharist. That's it. Okay? Other than that, any person, I don't care if it's the president or a homeless person, is a profound reflection of the glory of God. And again, much more of this to come. And this is the beauty of the Summa, because hopefully it helps you to look at the world differently and come closer to God because of our experience with the created world. God bless you. Thanks for watching. Test, test, test.